We out here talking MJ, LeBron, Kobe, Curry, but I think we got to start talking about Vince Gilligan because once it's all said and done, I think he might go down as one of the greatest TV minds ever because he has just produced the second greatest show that I've ever seen, and I want to talk about it. So, in case you guys are unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, I'm reviewing Better Call Saul today. And I've watched Breaking Bad. I watched it a few years ago, and I thought it was a really good show. And I would rate it in my top 5 list, but it's not my number one. That has to go to regular show. But Better Call Saul, I do think, is the better overall show in my opinion. And I just went ahead and finished the last season. And I've already spent a few videos reviewing what I thought about the earlier seasons of Better Call Saul. And so this one's really going to focus on season 6 and what I thought about the show as a whole. But man, was that a great time. I'm your host, Seb, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment down below. What's your favorite show? And if it is Better Call Saul, tell me what you guys thought about it. Was it good? Was it bad? And what were your favorite parts? I'm going to go ahead and review the good things and the bad things about the show as a whole. And if you guys haven't seen the show, I definitely recommend watching it because I'm going to go ahead and dive into some spoilers. And so this is going to be your only spoiler warning in the video. Alright, spoiler warning over. So I'm going to go ahead and get the negatives out of the way. And the only thing that I really have to say negatively about the show is the fact that I didn't like that Breaking Bad exists. Because if we look at Better Call Saul without knowing the events of Breaking Bad, I think that a lot of the scenes that felt kind of low stake or felt like alright stakes would have exponentially higher stakes just because we know that a lot of these characters are going to end up moving into the Breaking Bad universe, and we know that Breaking Bad already happened. And so some of the things that we expected to maybe happen to characters just we know it wasn't going to actually happen because we knew that they had to live and fight inside of Breaking Bad. Honestly, I wish I hadn't seen Breaking Bad because I would rate the show even higher than what I already do, just because I think that storytelling inside of Better Call Saul was way better than what it was in Breaking Bad. And that's not to say that it was bad in Breaking Bad. It was like good, but now it was great. But with all of the negativity out of the way, let's go ahead and start talking about the positives. And the first thing I want to talk about is the storytelling and the visuals. I went ahead and saw some reviews about what other people were saying about the show so that I could gather some thoughts and opinions. And I wanted to say something that was new and different. And I know that this is something that some people have already harped on about or talked about. But that storytelling and the visuals were so good in this show because there were so many scenes where they did a good job of just showing how like you were supposed to feel about it and what the message they were trying to convey without ever saying a single word. Like one thing that I saw people were saying is like the scenes where Jimmy and Kim get introduced to each other and it's Jimmy going downstairs to go smoke a cigarette with Kim and how they're interacting with each other and how they talk, like before we even saw them like making out and, you know, doing partner things, we could already tell that there was a little bit of like a spark and a relationship there. And God, I love Jimmy and Kim's dynamic. Like I really hate how the end of it goes with them, but man, I love seeing it throughout the show. And I wish it didn't end the way it did because I'm, a happy ending guy, but it was a great part of the show. We're going to skip ahead and revisit Jimmy and Kim's dynamic. But next I want to talk about Nacho's death because I thought that it was going to happen. I mean, I guessed it because I had already seen some clips talking about like Nacho's death, yada, yada, yada. I didn't know how it was going to happen. And I guess it kind of makes sense. Like I really didn't think that they were going to leave Nacho in Mexico to die. But seeing the plan all unfold, like it really shows you how crazy Gustavo is and how like heartless he is. And it really sucks because I thought that Mike and Gustavo's conversation about how like, Nacho really proved himself and how he had done everything that Gustavo had asked him to would, beg him to maybe live a little bit longer and maybe he gets caught on his own, but not because of them. But in the grand scheme of it all, Gustavo never really cared. Like he was just using him the whole time. And all the way to his death, he was literally using him. And I'm glad because I think the plan was for him to originally kill Don Bolsa, but he decided not to and just kill him. And he decided to just unalive himself. And so that was pretty shocking. I wasn't expecting to see that. But R.I.P. Nacho, I thought he was a great character. And I feel so bad for his ending because I do think that there was a world where he could have escaped it all and, just gone and lived his own life. But he made the choices to stay in to protect his dad. And I can't fault him for that. The next big shocking death that I want to talk about is actually Howard's death. And that's because I don't think anybody saw this coming. Like, I mean, I made a bold prediction that whatever happened to Howard was going to be the reason that Jimmy and Kim split up. And I was right about that, but I didn't think that it was going to lead to Howard dying. Like, I liked the whole drug arc and trying to make Howard seem like he was an addict. Like, I gotta admit, it was to the point where when I was watching it, I was getting uncomfortable because I genuinely felt really bad. I didn't think Howard deserved what they were doing to him, and it made watching the show kind of awkward and weird sometimes because I resonated with Howard. I didn't think he was a great guy, but I thought that he at least deserved some sort of happy ending, and seeing how his life was falling apart outside of just what Jimmy and Kim were doing to him, it was kind of hard to watch. And then in the climax moment of the meeting with Sandpiper, that was insane how he started tweaking out and, blaming the judge that was there and saying, oh, you got hired by Jimmy to do this. Like, I do think that some of that was on him because his irrational thinking was definitely kicking in. And maybe that was because of the drugs that they induced on him. Maybe it made it harder for him to think straight. But then when he shows up to the apartment, I don't think anybody was thinking what was going to happen next because, we knew that he came there because he knew that Jimmy and Kim were behind this. And of course, the whole time he's saying, like, I know you guys can't admit to it, but we all know what's going on here. And, like, you guys won, but, like, why did you do it? And he figures it out. It's because they were getting off to it, And, like, everything he said about them was true. But then look who comes sneaking in behind them. It's Lalo. And when he comes in and Howard's talking, I thought maybe we were going to see some crazy dynamic duo of, like, Lalo and Howard, and that they were going to team up to go after Jimmy and Kim. But instead, Howard is just, dissing Jimmy and Kim in front of them. And then Lalo ends up just smoking him. Just like pop. And that was insane. Like, I remember like having my jaw like actually dropped. And I was going to go to bed after the end of this episode, but I literally had to stay up and watch the next one because I couldn't just leave right there. Like, I was like, damn. Then I ended up only getting like 6 hours of sleep before class, but it was totally worth it because that story was just insane. After the episode, I watched a video by Vince Gilligan where he was talking about how they purposely wanted it to be really dramatic because they wanted the effects of Jimmy and Kim to be something that they could never have foreseen in 1,000 years. And it's true. Like, if they hadn't gone to this extent of, making Howard's life miserable, like, they knew he was going to show up because when he knocked, they were like, you don't have to answer that. Like, they were expecting this. And if they hadn't done that, if they had just, gone on with their lives and let Howard be, then he would probably still be alive. And, maybe his life would have gotten better. Maybe his marriage would have gotten better. But instead, they ended up having him get murdered in cold blood. And then they framed his death as a cocaine addict. And it was because of them. Like, and they felt horrible about it because this is not what they wanted. And I thought that was great to show, like, where the turning point of their relationship was, because we all knew that the only reason they were in the relationship for that long was because they wanted to get Howard's revenge. Like, they should have broken up at the end of season 5. Yeah, at the end of season 5. But they stuck it out because they were having fun. And as soon as it ended and they saw how bad they are together, that's when they ended up breaking up their relationship. Which brings me to my next point about Jimmy and Kim. And it's so sad to see because Kim was the only person that truly supported Jimmy from the very beginning, even in his worst times and in his best times. Like, she was there for all of it. And it really sucked because she put up through so much. Jimmy really did not deserve Kim. And I thought that, if somebody was going to change him for the better, it was going to be her. And of course, we knew who Jimmy was going to end up to be. He was going to become Saul Goodman, the lawyer that helped Walter White do all of these crazy shit. And it was really sad because we knew that their relationship was going to have to end. And I wasn't expecting it to be because of this. It was so heartbreaking at the end of their episode when they go to Howard's funeral and they go talk to his wife and stuff. And then Kim ends up lying to Howard's wife about seeing him sniffing cocaine in the office just so that way she could help Jimmy out in like a tough spot because she was like, she could sense that, they were lying. And obviously she can't prove it, but it is just how it is. And Kim doubled down, and then at the end of it, she ends up quitting the bar, and then she ends up packing all her things and leaving Jimmy. And that was just so sad to see. Like, I was really rooting for them, and it hurt a lot because we've seen them go through so much together. I guess it makes sense that this was the breaking point, but I still wasn't prepared for it. Like, I really cared about them too. And then seeing at the very end how Jimmy ends up almost getting away with all the crimes that he's ever done as Saul under Walter White and everything beforehand. He almost got away. He reduced like 200 years down to 7. Like, if you don't if you don't tell me that's the best lawyer in the world, then I don't know what to say to you, man. But he ends up giving it all up because he wanted to prove to Kim that he had changed. And it was so sad to see because, I mean, he really hadn't up until that moment. Like, until even when he was getting told that, like, what he was going to do was going to affect Kim, like, you could tell that there was still, like, a sliver of chance that he was just going to go through with it because, you know, it's not him, so why does it matter? But then when he ends up seeing her in person and gives it more thought on the plane, like, I think at the end of the plane ride is when he decides to change his mind about, you know, maybe I should tell the truth because I don't want to tear down Kim. And then when he sees her in person, like, I think that's when he was like, yeah, I'm definitely going through with this. And he came clean. He confessed about all of it to prove that he had changed. And then at the very end of the show, we see Kim visiting Jimmy in the prison cell, and she ends up popping a cig with him, just like how when we were first introduced to them, you know, they're just smoking there and talking. And she jokes with him because she was like, ha, you had him all the way down to 7, you know? And that was the end of the show. And that was so sad to see. Like, I wanted the happy ending. I wanted them to end up all together, but we didn't get to see that. And that really hurt. And I feel bad because I didn't really like how Kim's character arc was after the whole thing, after she left, because she got into a marriage and I don't know, her life just seemed kind of meaningless. Like, she was just kind of going through the motions. She couldn't even answer, like, what the fuck she wanted. Every single response between, like, a yes or no question was like, oh, maybe. They might. Whatever you want. And it was just like, damn, this is not the Kim that I knew. And so just seeing them end like that, I mean, I felt a little bit more at peace, but that's not what I wanted. And then, of course, the man of the hour, Lalo Salamanca. And wow, what a crazy-ass villain. Like, I thought Gustavo Fring was going to be, like, the big bad, but, I mean, he is, like, still, like, top 2 big bad, but Lalo Salamanca gives him a real edge for, like, that first top bad guy in the Breaking Bad universe. And it was crazy because when it was first introduced, like, I didn't get it, you know? I heard so many things about the show and people were like, oh, wait till you get to Lalo. Like, oh my god, I love Lalo. Like, Lalo, 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 Lalo. And I'm like, what the fuck, you know? Like, who is this Lalo guy? And then when we meet him, I'm like, okay, whatever, you know? Like, sure, he's got some aura, but, you know, whatever. Turns out I was wrong. You know, the more I watched him, the more he kept raising me up because, like, this guy was insane. Like, I loved how he talked. I loved his, like, character. And, you know, the whole time, he was the only one that was smart enough to, like, put all the pieces together. And sure, that's because he had some motive. He wanted to figure out, like, who put Hector in the wheelchair. But seeing the whole progression was just insane. All the way to the very end when he ends up killing Howard, and then he makes Jimmy and Kim go on this elaborate plan for them so that way he can go ahead and find Gustavo and then show that he was trying to make his own meth lab. That was insane. That was an insane plot that he came up with. And it almost worked, but of course, we knew that Lalo had to die because Gustavo was going to be the big bad in Breaking Bad. And so seeing that, like, final gunfight, that one fell a little bit flat for me because I knew that he was going to die, and maybe some of you guys watching it too were like, yeah, you know, we know what's going to happen. But had I not seen Breaking Bad, like, that episode would have actually been peak because it's like, you know, what the fuck happens next, you know? Does he get away with it, or does he, you know, get exposed and die? And it turns out that he did not get away with it. Or I guess Lalo didn't get away with it. Gustavo did. And that was the end of Lalo. But his reign in the show, like, he would literally had them shaking. Like, Jimmy and Kim were literally in the middle of telling Howard how, like, stupid he was and how he needs to go home because he's obviously not feeling well. And then they got, like, incredibly shaken and were just like, dude, Howard, just go, bro. Just go. Like, and then he gets popped and, you know, wow. All that to say that Lalo was definitely an outstanding character. Literally had some mad scary aura going on. And wow, I would not have it any other way. So then the last part of this, I just want to talk about some highlight episodes that I really enjoyed from the season. And I tried to stay away from the season finales just because I felt like those are going to be, like, you know, give me's, because that's where everything, all of the plot lines from the season come together. And so I really tried to stray away from that. But I'm going to go ahead and give you 5 of my favorite episodes, not in any particular order, and, like, one from about every season. But I'm going to go ahead and start with season 1, episode 9, Pimento. The reason why I like that one so much is because that's the episode where Jimmy's, you know, showing the Sandpiper case to HHM, and he's presenting it to Howard, and Howard's like, all right, you can give that to us. We're going to go partner with another firm. And he got mad that they didn't offer him a partnership spot. And then at the very end of the episode, we find out that it was because of Chuck that he didn't get the partnership. And it was because Chuck didn't like that Jimmy got his fake bar degree and that he wasn't like a true lawyer or whatever. And that was crazy. Like, that was the first time we ever saw that Chuck, hated Jimmy. And that was really sad to see, because the whole episode or whole season we see them, Jimmy's doing so much for Chuck, and then when it's time for Chuck to return the favor, he's just resentful. My next episode that I have on the list is season 3, episode 5, Chicanery, and that one needs no explanation, just because that was the famous episode where Jimmy is in court defending himself against Chuck, because Chuck has like the videotape of him, and Jimmy decided to break into his door and try to break the videotape of him admitting to like a felony and all this stuff. And Chuck was trying to get Jimmy disbarred, but in it, he ends up arguing a lot, and then Chuck explodes at the very end, where he just goes on a rant about how much he hates Jimmy and how he was doing this because he just despises him, and that ends up making the case fall flat. And so Jimmy only ends up getting suspended for 1 year, and then he could reapply for the bar license. My next favorite episode was season 4, episode 9, Weiderheisen, and I hope I pronounced that right. And it's the episode where Warner escapes Gustavo's meth cooking area because he wants to have a vacation with his wife. And then this is also the episode where we see Jimmy doesn't get his bar license back. And then that leads to Jimmy and Kim having their first real big argument on the screen, and it pops out. It ends with them like saying some hurtful things to each other. And there were a couple of quotes that I really took out from this episode because I thought that they were really representative of the show as a whole. And it was when Jimmy was getting mad at Kim for, not wanting to share an office with him. And she says, I'd drop everything for you. Whenever you need me, I'm there. When you got disbarred, I was there. But not sharing an office space with you is the only thing that tells you how much I care for you. And then he was like, see right there, that's you kicking somebody who's down already. And she looks at him dead in the eyes and just pauses, and she goes, Jimmy, you were always down. And I was like, damn, that was an insane bar. She didn't have to hit him like that. But I mean, I thought it summarized the show pretty well. Jimmy just couldn't see past the things that he wanted. He couldn't see that there were other things that were happening around him too. And then her laying out that line, just, you're always down. It's true. I don't think I've ever seen him in an episode where he wasn't on the up. And at the beginning, we feel bad for him because he was down on his luck. But then towards the end, we see him purposely putting himself in these bad situations, and you can't feel bad for him anymore. It's just damn, Jimmy, maybe if you weren't such an idiot and a crook, you might have a better life. My next episode is season 5, episode 10, Something Unforgivable. And I know I broke my rule, but it's just because this one was just a different series finale or season finale. And in this episode, it's when we get to see that Howard confronts Kim about how Jimmy's been acting to him. And this is when they decide that they want to go ahead and pursue their plan. But then also at the beginning of the episode, this is when Jimmy confesses to Kim because the previous night, Lalo had showed up to their place and threatened to, shoot him if he told him the story about what had happened in the desert, because Lalo knew that Jimmy ended up lying, but he didn't know why. It was just insane how he ended up confessing to him because they just got married for the fact that she couldn't testify against them. And then seeing the Howard thing, it set up the rest of the plot line for season 6, and it set up the plot line for the rest of Jimmy and Kim's future. And so, I mean, I had to put this episode on there. And then I almost forgot the ending of the episode where we have Nacho at Lalo's place, and this is when he opens up the floodgates to that military army or whatever that go in, and then Lalo ends up fighting them to survive. And it was really sad because all of Lalo's family gets murdered, but he ends up killing all of the army men, and then this is when he goes on the run, and this is how we get to season 6. And so, just a great episode, and I couldn't leave it out. And then last but definitely not least, season 6, episode 7, Point and Execution. Because this is when we get to see all of that plotting against Howard. It finally culminates into the medium where he ends up, just tearing it all apart, and they think he's a drug addict. And then at the very end of the episode is when we get Howard's death. And I just thought that this episode was just super influential because you literally get to see everything that they planned, and then see how it backfired tremendously, and it led to Howard's death. it was so sad to see because, like I mentioned earlier, like he didn't deserve any of this stuff. And they didn't even want this. Like, this is not something that they foreseen happening, but it did. And so just the impact of the episode and what it has on the rest of the show, just absolutely legendary. And then another quote that summarizes Kim's character was when Howard was talking to Jimmy and Kim, when he's saying that, you guys get off to this stuff. He says, for you, Jimmy, like, I expect nothing less from you. And then he looks at Kim and he goes, but for you, Kim, you're one of the smartest human beings I've ever met. And this is the life you choose to live. And I think that stuck with her. And I think that's honestly why she ended up, leaving Jimmy and going and pursuing a new life and just, this barn, because it traumatized her. Like, he said that to her. And then she sees that Howard dies because of her actions. And that changes the trajectory of her life. And so it was just influential all around. Great episode. I think this was probably my favorite episode in the show. So, yeah. But that tells the story of what I thought about the show and what I thought about the ending. And I really think that it was one of the greatest shows I've ever seen. Unfortunately for me, I'm a cartoon guy and maybe a little bit of nostalgia, but regular show is my number one. Just because I love the comedy and the goofiness behind it, and then kind of like a story happening at the end of the seasons. That was kind of cool. And it's also making a comeback. Shout out them. May 11th, I do believe, if you guys are interested in watching the lost tapes. But Better Call Saul, oh my God, what a masterpiece. I wish I could rewatch the show all over again. And if I could, I would watch it without seeing Breaking Bad and then go back and see Breaking Bad. Because I really do think that the show would have hit a lot differently not knowing where some of these characters end up. But man, Vince Gilligan, dude, if you're watching this, you might be the GOAT, dude. Just keep it up and, I don't know, give me an interview sometime. But that's enough rambling for today, enough yapping. I'll let you guys go on ahead and live your own lives. As always, thank you guys for watching the video, and I hope you all have a great day.